Very good, Dennis. So now's the time for some meditation. So if you're not sitting comfortably yet, now's the time to close your eyes and with eyes closed to be more sensitive to your own body. We begin by making sure our legs are in a good position. That our butt is well positioned on a cushion or a chair. That the back is either stretched if you feel that's more comfortable, or just slumping or leaning against the back of a chair or a wall. You find what's most comfortable for you. We don't assume. We're aware, experiment with kindness, and then see what works. And the hands can be in your lap, can be on your knees, wherever they feel comfortable, rested, so they don't need to be moved. And then the head, well balanced on the neck. Not too far forward, not too far back. It feels good. And the face, when we're aware of the sensations around our eyes and mouth, we can learn how to relax those sensations. Mindfulness gives us feedback, and through feedback we learn how to take away tightness and tension anywhere in our body. We know what causes tension, and we know how to relieve that tension. Then you go to your whole body, just sitting here, relaxed to the max, or as best you can relax it. once the body is relaxed, it usually feels pleasant. Even though I have irritation in the throat, still the whole body feels so pleasant. I focus on that delightful feeling. And I let my body go. Looked after it as best I can. Now I go to my mind. First of all, the peaceometer. How peaceful or how agitated am I? I'm honest. Usually give it a number of 1 to 10. It could be 6.5 or 2.3, it doesn't matter, but you get an idea of how peaceful you are. And then, just how you relax the body, how you can make your mind go even deeper towards towards peace. And what imitates it? And as the mind gets more and more peaceful, then may come the time to invite the breath into your mind. So you know the breath as it enters your body. You know the breath as it leaves. You don't control the breath. You just observe it, like a supervisor. As long as the mind is peaceful, first of all, it's not that difficult to maintain awareness on your breathing. And if you want something to help, you can use little useful mantras. Breathing in, peace. Breathe out, let go. Breathing in, peace. Breathe out, let go. every now and again, how peaceful are you? Stops you wandering off. And eventually, once the peace starts to become clear and joyful, you're enjoying watching your breath. It becomes fascinating. See the whole breath from beginning to end. Then your mind is satisfied and it stays with the breath like a good friend. I will now be quiet until close to the end of the meditation. Just getting close to the end of the meditation. How peaceful are you? And what does peace feel like? Especially to notice the quality of joy and delight, place of rest. Where much of the busyness and arguments of life disappear. Peace of mind. I will now ring the gong 3 times. Please listen. At the last ringing of the gong, it's the time to open the eyes.